Let's now go to Ethan's other main think piece from Sunday at Trojans Wire, talking about Lincoln Riley's coaching, the leadership, the play calling, and what it revealed about Lincoln Riley's performance. That's really the next really big topic here on our show on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. So, Ethan, take us through this think piece on Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, so I think that there's really two parts to this, and it's a tale of two halves to some degree. It's also a tale of the two sides of the ball, but there's really two angles that you can come at this, and I will come at it from both angles because I think both angles are worth touching on. In one sense, like there were lots of moments, and most of them occurred in the first half, that were incredibly hair-pullingly frustrating. Like Maava not running the ball at the beginning of the game, them not even getting the ball to King Miller enough. Like that felt like 2024, 2023, like, you know, Marshawn Lloyd and Woody Marks ripping off 10-yard runs and then, you know, getting stopped for like a 3-yard run. And then all of a sudden, you know, Lincoln Riley's like, oh, we can't run anymore. And it was like, no, like King Miller's averaging 7.5 yards a carry. Like, just give him the ball. And Maava can't throw in this game. Like, Maava's, you can, in Lincoln Riley's mind, you can, you know, think all you want that Maava is a great quarterback and he's going to figure it out and he's going to be better in future games. But you also have to take the obvious thing that's right in front of you and run the football more. And then obviously, you know, USC still couldn't stop the run. Again, credit to Emmett Johnson, who I believe is a really good running back. And I think he really proved that against USC. He played exceedingly well. You know, all the stuff I talked about last week about him being elusive, him being good at kind of shaking off tacklers. But he also played really physically, which is not something that I've seen a ton from his game on tape. So a lot of credit for him doing that there. And so, like, you know, so credit to him. He's a great runner, just like last week, Jeremiah Love and the Notre Dame run game. Obviously, lots of talent there. But USC still, like, all they had to really do was sell out for the run. Like we talked about how even before he got hurt, Raiola wasn't playing that well. And, you know, USC still wouldn't sell out for the run. And so it was like, are we ever going to are we ever going to call an aggressive defensive scheme? Are we ever going to learn to really run the football? Are we ever going to, you know, like that's kind of where I was at in the first half. And I was really, really down about it. Like sitting at halftime at 14-6, I was not feeling great. But then, you know, I think I have to give credit to them on the other side because they did make some of the adjustments. Like I said, they did finally, like Maava finally ran the ball and it was like, wow, finally, we've been calling for this all season on the podcast and we're finally seeing it and it's working. Oh my goodness. You know, they gave King Miller the ball most of the time and they kind of allowed him to carry USC's offense to enough points to win the game. When TJ Lateef came in, they put all the pressure on him, which it was like, yes, the USC has been playing a lot of bad Big Ten quarterbacks and a lot of quarterbacks who have been, if they're good, they've been putting up bad performances like CJ Carr. They still won't put pressure on people, and they finally did it. So it took way too long to learn it, you know, both in the season and in the game, but they finally did. And I think, you know, that's kind of the last bit of hope that people are clinging to about Lincoln Riley. Like I am someone who, you know, still remembers when Lincoln Riley came in 2022 and created a lot of excitement, and especially being a student during that time, like that was really, really awesome. And so I think like I want Lincoln Riley to come in and restore USC to like an elite level. And so I always come at my commentary about Lincoln Riley from that angle. Like I would love for, you know, USC to be like, you know, Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma was and better. Like I would love for that to happen. Perennial playoff contender, perennial playoff attendee. And I hope that, you know, and I tend to just believe in people and believe that, you know, we're all human and we all make mistakes, but we can eventually, you know, learn from our mistakes and be better. And so that's kind of what the hope that I cling to for Lincoln Riley. Though I don't trust him, and I would understand why none of you trust him. Like I said, I'm still nervous about the rest of the season. But like I said, if you want to be optimistic, which I know is not everybody's slant, the one thing you can kind of cling to is he did eventually learn it. So that's kind of what we're waiting for, I think, is can Lincoln Riley learn in the 11th hour finally the things that have held him back at USC? Can he kind of turn those things around? And, you know, we've seen it a little bit, like with the recruiting, with getting Chad Bowden in there, you know, finally returning USC to the number one recruiting team in the country. as where they should be with all the resources that they have being in Southern California. So, and like, can those other aspects like get sorted out? Will the defense learn that, hey, we can actually like play aggressive defense and have success? Hey, Jaden Mayava running will have success. So I think, we'll find a lot of that out over the course of the rest of the season. Will they adjust, even if it's not Lincoln Riley's preference? Because I know Lincoln Riley's preference would be to throw the football a lot and to, play opportunistic defense and get a lot of interceptions and turn the ball back over to his offense and all that stuff. But can we be humble enough? Can we be self-reflective enough? And I'd like to hope that he can. I don't know for sure that he can. I don't really trust that he can, but I am still clinging to a little shred of hope that he can. And the 2026 recruiting class is a big reason why, obviously. A lot of people are holding out hope. There are a lot of talented freshmen on this team that I think and sophomores that are reason to have hope as well. But yeah, can that be the case? And so that's kind of how I wrapped up this article, I would say.
All right, Crash, your thoughts on that and the related issues that Ethan brings up.
So yeah, obviously a lot to unpack there. And I think that is something, it is like, I think I really liked your analogy of it's like playing whack-a-mole. As soon as you solve one, another old issue pops up. I mean, it's kind of been a thing. Like, so I was like, kind of a great analogy, I thought, Ethan. I mean, dude, you come up with the best analogies. I mean, remember burgers and milkshakes? Like, that was great too. So, Ethan with the analogies there. You got to just shout you out. But onto my takes about it. Especially, like, I mean, there have been some where it's like, yeah, it does feel like that. I mean, we've seen that kind of with, like, the offense, the resurgence of the offense this year, and then the defense regressing a little bit. And then but then the one that kind of does seem to be pretty persistent that kind of hasn't, it seems like, it hasn't exactly been dealt with too much, or not to the extent that I'd like, is the running. And maybe that's partly because Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders are both out now. So maybe Riley's still, trying to figure out, all right, how can I trust King Miller? But then again, you still have we don't have one. You have two quarterbacks capable of running and using their legs. We both know that. We know that about Jaden Mayava and Hassan Longstreet. So we know that. But then also, I just feel like with the run, it's like I thought you made great points about just, whoever it was, Marshawn Lloyd, Woody Marks, Quentin Joyner, whoever it was, maybe the run game doesn't work a little bit. Riley just pivots away from it. So I think that's the big thing that I really took, is just there's sometimes things where Riley's just like, okay, it's not working, we're done with it. When really it's like sometimes you got to be patient, especially with the run game issue. That one was the one that really that caught my eye in your article, Ethan, because that's just how teams win games in the Big Ten, is by just running the ball. I mean, I'm not trying to say you shouldn't use the pass and maybe be a little different, but running is how you win in the Big Ten. So whether that's with your running backs or a mobile dual threat quarterback, I really think that was the big thing that caught my eye.
All right. I promised that I was going to be bad cop tonight. So like, this is where I become bad cop. The thing that really becomes apparent right now, at least this is the way it strikes me, with Jaden Mayava regressing and with these road games against better competition over the past month not being nearly as fluid, smooth, productive as the first month of the season, it's the schedule, man. Like, it is not a complicated take. It's not a complicated read. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. Like, when we went into the season, I wasn't thinking Michigan State was going to be particularly good, but like, Michigan State is woof bad. Michigan State and Purdue, both the bottom three. They're slumming it out with Wisconsin at the very bottom of the Big Ten. Those are really bad teams. And so it occurs to me, and in watching this game against Nebraska, it just like hit me right between the eyes. It was the schedule. At USC fattened up on the cream puffs, and as soon as the level of competition became better, stronger, tougher, the level of performance has gone down. So it's not as though Jaden Mayava is in a downward spiral. It's just, he's faced tougher competition. That it really is that simple. If you look at USC's aggregate stats, now I'm not like the ultimate nerd number cruncher analytics guy, but I would have to think that when you take away you break down all the different games that, USC's national statistical rankings are built on the back of mostly Missouri State, Georgia Southern, and also Michigan State, the 45-point game in the Coliseum. And if you compare that to, the past month, like you're going to see the numbers weighted to the cushy start of the season in September. And so like there's a parallel here with 2023. Soft front end of the schedule, much tougher back end of the schedule. But you also see something from 2024 in that, Miller Moss, good at home, not nearly as good on the road. Like you can make that parallel to a certain degree with Jaden Maiava this year. So Lincoln Riley is still a play calling genius and one of the great quarterback teachers of our time. That's not going away. But what seems to be improvement, overall evolution in late September, early October, here we are in early November. No, it wasn't that, Lincoln Riley did this amazing job. Now, I mean, he didn't do a bad job. Like, he certainly had Jaden Maiava ready to play, and we were all impressed that, after seeing his football IQ not being all there against Texas A&M in the bowl game, to see him be so crisp and fluid and comfortable early in the season, like that was obviously a plus, and Lincoln Riley obviously did some good work. So I'm not taking that away from Lincoln Riley. This is not taking something away. It's the extent of it, right? It's the degree to which people, and I include myself here, I'm guilty of this just as much as anyone else, if not more so. I was thinking Jaden Maiava had really, really evolved. He had evolved, but not nearly to the extent that I had previously thought. And so that's why I'm bad cop, is because the competition got tougher and we're seeing a leveling off in the overall production. 24 points at Notre Dame, 21 against Nebraska. This is not Lincoln Riley, click, clack, we're going to come into your crib and put 40 on you or 50. And it's kind of ironic. Caleb Williams scores 47 points. Now, maybe, my grandmother could score 47 on the Cincinnati Bengals, but that's kind of a separate story. Nevertheless, like Caleb Williams looked like Mr. Oklahoma or 2022 USC today, putting 47 on an opponent. And that just kind of highlights the gap between the standard that we hope for with Lincoln Riley and the standard that we are seeing right now. Like, this is not an especially good product. I mean, we can say it's an okay product. It's a decent product. It's not a great product, for sure. Like, this is not the click-clack Pete Carroll era. When Pete Carroll goes into Nebraska, he ransacks the children of the corn. He pillages them and he dominates, all right? This is not that, right? This was not that. It wasn't even close. And my fear is, this standard of play is going to lead to a 21-point loss in Autzen Stadium. This standard of play. Now, there's 3 weeks to get better. There's 3 weeks to work through these things, gather some momentum. Maybe this win, it was an ugly duckling, but just winning on the road at night will fill this team's fuel tank, give it some belief, give it some juice for the stretch run ahead. And maybe by the time we get to Autzen Stadium, USC will be ready to finally play that elusive great game on the road, which we're all on our knees praying for, because it still hasn't happened. It happened all the time for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Goes to Morgantown, hangs 65 on West Virginia. He goes to Stillwater, Bedlam against Oklahoma State, puts up 62. Goes to Lubbock, hangs 59 on the Red Raiders. We're not seeing that at USC. We got glimpses of it in 2022 with some of those blowouts against Stanford and other teams, but since then, haven't really seen that. And so, like, this project with the USC offense is a long ways off. And in September, I was thinking, maybe we aren't that far away from getting to that standard. But with the schedule getting tougher in October this past month and then seeing Nebraska, I just have to concede that what felt like dramatic evolution in late September has actually just turned out to be, no, it was just the schedule. And the other really big reason for, I'm not talking about 2025 here, I'm talking about next year and beyond for Lincoln Riley. The other reason I remain firmly in the pessimists camp, USC has not played Ohio State or Indiana last year or this year. Going to have to play those guys next year. You're going to have to play Ryan Day. You're going to have to play Kurt Signetti. What then? Like, these have been relatively manageable Big Ten schedules. USC is not playing most of the top 3 in the Big Ten. So what happens when the schedule gets tougher and the standards here? Like, I draw some parallels with what's going on with Mario Cristobal in Miami. Clemson and Florida State suck. Like, the ACC should be a layup, Hurricanes, and they are booting it. They are booting the ball. They are kicking it away. Like, that is just a massive wasted opportunity for Miami. Like, you should be owning the ACC, lock, stock, and barrel. You know, Clemson and Florida State, they're both under 500. They're both going to be playing on ACC Network, which is just the most hilarious thing in the world. If you follow, you know, college football litigation, realignment, courtroom dramas, all that stuff, you know, but hilarity aside, like, Miami should be dominating the ACC, and Miami's not even going to make it to the ACC championship game. There's 6 teams ahead of Miami. And that's with all these NIL investments. That's with these high-end quarterbacks, Carson Beck this year, Cam Ward last year. So what happens when Florida State presumably is going to fire Mike Norvell and get a better coach? What happens then? You know, what happens when Clemson and Florida State get it back together? Where does Miami going to go? That's the comparison with Lincoln Riley and USC. You know, 9-3, which is what I think we're heading for this season. Not that it doesn't seem that bad on the surface, but you know, to blow that Illinois game, which I'm going to be cursing, I think, all winter, you know, assuming USC does go 9-3 and fall short of the playoff, I'm going to be cursing that Illinois game to no end. You know, Illinois did not turn out to be nearly as good as thought, and that is a nuance that needs to be stressed here. You know, if Illinois played like a top 10 team and USC lost, that's one thing. You know, it's like the World Series. The Blue Jays lost, but man, they gave it everything, you know, and so sometimes you can play great and you still lose because the other guy is just a little bit better. I use the Federer-Nadal Wimbledon analogy. Like, you play an all-time classic match, game, whatever, and you still lose because the other guy won the final point. You know, that's different. This is, the Big Ten is mediocre. There's a lot of fat. A lot of slop. Like, Michigan barely beat Purdue, you know. So that result, I mean, the USC Michigan result, it was a lot more about Michigan than it was about USC, because Michigan barely beat Purdue by 5 at home. Michigan ain't good. So USC going 9-3, if you told me before this season, probably wouldn't have been too disappointed. But then you see how mediocre Illinois is. You see how mediocre Michigan is. You see that this is not one of Marcus Freeman's best Notre Dame teams, and you're still leaving these games on the table. You know, next year you have to play Ohio State and Indiana, and next year other teams that aren't that great now could be better. What happens then? The margin's going to shrink. So that is part of why I'm the bad cop and why I am still very much a pessimist about USC. Like, the level of play, it can't go up 1 notch. It needs to go up 5 or 6 notches to be ready to beat Oregon in a few weeks. So let's just address that very briefly. Obviously, it's a few weeks away, but right now, you know, if I had to ask you what's going to happen in that Oregon game, and yes, have to deal with Northwestern and Iowa first, one game at a time, of course, but, you know, talk shows, right? Talk show hosts get to talk about things that are a few weeks down the line. The guys in the locker room, you know, tunnel vision, blinders on, blah, blah, blah. We get it. We know how that works. But I can ask Ethan and Crash right now. Let's say scale of 1 to 10, or however else you want to chop it up, your level of confidence for USC at Oregon in 3 weeks. Ethan first, Crash second.
Right now, I'm at like a 3. I think the only reason I'm not at a 0 or a 1 is because the defense played better against Nebraska, you know, and not just the defense, but the defensive secondary. Like I said, I think it was like, and you can read my article on Trojans Wire about this, but it was easily Marcellus Williams' best game, which Marcellus Williams has been one of the most frustrating players on the defense all season long. And so to see him come out and play well, and remember, he's just a redshirt freshman, so he's still got a lot of room to grow. There's, like I said, I'm someone who likes to hold on to hope about people, so I hope that he can turn into a star for USC. So that was really great to see. Desmond Stevens, also another young player, linebacker, who's been really frustrating to watch because, he's not very decisive. And it feels like USC has Jaden Walker behind him and isn't playing him enough. But he went out and played a really great game. And then Kamari Ramsey, it was like, oh, Kamari Ramsey is hitting guys behind the line of scrimmage and, making big plays. Like, oh, it's the Kamari Ramsey we all know and love. So I think because of that, and, it was not DeCarlos Nicholson's best game, but he's been pretty solid all season. So I think that was great to see. Like, it felt like a return to the defensive line didn't play that well, which is a little concerning. Like the Nebraska offensive line, especially in pass protection, is really poor, and they went out and got 1 sack. So that's not great. It's like I said, it just felt like a return to 2024 form. Like the strength of the team was suddenly the secondary, and the defensive line couldn't do anything, and the offense couldn't really do anything except for running the football. But the secondary was great. So if we can see there's a reality, and this could be an alternate reality, and it probably is because of how USC really lays eggs in a lot of these big games. But there's a potential alternate reality where like the secondary plays like they did against Nebraska, and they're able to build confidence these next 2 weeks against bad quarterbacks like Ryan Brown's the Purdue quarterback. Preston Stone he's
a bad quarterback, man.
So bad. He is easily the worst starting quarterback. Like, he's maybe not TJ Lateef bad, but he is easily the worst starting quarterback in the Big Ten. He is awful. And then Mark Gronowski would probably be as bad as Preston Stone if they let him throw the football as much. Like, his stats are way lower than Preston Stone because they're so intent on running the football. So he doesn't look as bad on paper. Well, unless you're a big yards guy, which that'd be a little concerning if you're just looking at yards in 2025 for evaluating football players. But Mark Gronowski is not he's bottom tier Big Ten quarterback. Also, he's not very good. Iowa's offense does not run through Mark Gronowski in any way, shape, or form. So they have some opportunities here in the next couple of weeks to, like, it's almost like a restart to the season for the secondary. Like, they can almost treat this not like cupcake games, but like kind of tune-up games for Oregon, because these are 2 of like probably the worst 3 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. They're awful. They're so bad. So there's a world where they build confidence over these next 2 games and they come into Oregon firing on all cylinders. And then if we can figure out the issues with the offense and the defensive line, and, prepare them mentally. Like, if this team is firing on all cylinders, I think they can bring a great fight to Oregon and potentially beat them. I just think the issue is that they won't be firing on all cylinders. And that's why my confidence is at a 3. Like Crash brought up my whack-a-mole analogy. Like, we finally saw the secondary play great, and then the strengths of this team disappeared. Like, Maiava was bad. The receivers weren't dominant. The defensive line got 1 sack. Like, everything that we thought about this team for the first, 4.5 weeks, it just went and against Michigan went, completely out the window in this game. So it was like, when are we going to see everything all come together? And nothing ever really does all come together. And, maybe there'll be some complete performances. A complete performance against Iowa specifically would really help my confidence. It's Autzen Stadium, so it's never going to be higher than like a 6 going into Autzen Stadium. But we could get to that level if, USC plays a really, really complete dominant performance against Iowa, which I don't think that they will at this point. But, that's kind of the thing that could boost my confidence. Like I said, potential alternate world where all these things come together. But, in the Lincoln, it seems to be like playing whack-a-mole. Like, we can never nail everything down. It's just one issue gets fixed and then an old one pops up again, or a new one pops up. And so that's why I'm not very confident. Another like quick note, like you brought up the Illinois game. My lack of confidence in the Oregon game would not be an issue right now if we beat Illinois, because Oregon would be our first conference loss. I feel a lot better about the other 3 games. Like, we're a college football playoff team, even if the Oregon game is a likely loss. And so that's really, like you said, that's the game that I'm going to be the most frustrated about. I was the most frustrated about when it happened. Like, it's not even necessarily at this point about, and you all also remember the Notre Dame post game. Like, I wasn't necessarily like the sky is falling, because I was like, oh, it's a non-conference loss to a team that was the college football playoff runner-up last year. Like, we can learn from this possibly. The USC learning from this thing doesn't always happen, like I said, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. But like, the Oregon game shouldn't be as big of an issue as it is, and we wouldn't be putting ourselves in such a tough position if we beat Illinois. So I'm not very confident, and I wish it didn't matter, is kind of the place that I'm at right now, to be honest.
So I'm pretty nervous, probably about 3, right about where you are, Ethan, about it, just because of how they played. And Matt, one thing I took note of during your rant was you talked about just kind of the soft front end of the schedule. Like, at a point that Brian Jacob made in the chat about 15 minutes ago that struck me as you were talking was he said, shouldn't have backed out on the Ole Miss game. It was in the Collie, for Christ's sakes. I bring that up because I'm just wondering if USC had played that game. I'm not trying to get into whether or not they should, but if USC plays that game, even if it's a loss, we will have a better idea. We probably have a better idea now of what to expect going forward for every game, probably. Obviously, they'd probably take care of business against all the other cupcakes on the schedule, like Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State. And then we'd probably have a better idea going into the Illinois game, the Notre Dame game, even this Nebraska game, kind of probably could have made us all right, this is what we can expect from this team. And the same applies with these upcoming games. Like, we can probably feel pretty good about Northwestern. Not sure what'll happen with Iowa. But then I'm also, but then we'd probably also know, like, all right, what can we expect with USC going into Oregon? Because win or lose that Ole Miss game, if it were to happen in an alternate universe, we just have so much more information about this team. So I really thought that was an interesting point that Brian brought up in the chat, and that's why I wanted to highlight it as part of my argument of why I'm kind of nervous about Autzen, in part because I just don't know what is going to happen on a week-to-week basis with this team, and it can put you a little bit on edge, make you a little bit nervous as both